Now, the reason I bring this up is you hear Log4j, boop, blah, 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 blah. And you hear, oh, Apache. Blah, 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 blah.
It sounds like the teacher on Charlie Brown.
Exactly.
You're listening to the Help Me with HIPAA podcast, where HIPAA and humor collide to make learning fun. Your delightful hosts are Donna Grindle and David Sims. Relax. HIPAA help is on the way.
Welcome to episode 342 of the Help Me with HIPAA podcast. My name is David Sims of HIPAA for MSPs, and joining me is Donna Grindle of Cardinal. Good afternoon, Donna.
Good afternoon, David.
Almost evening. Good evening.
I know, we're switching up things. Switching up our schedule is going to kind of make us confused more so than normal.
It's my comfort zone.
Yeah, just hang out here. What is that one about? I live in a state of confusion because I know people here, or I like them, or what, I don't remember what it is. Anyway.
Yep.
I'm comfortable there.
All right. So let's remind everybody the Privacy and Security Bootcamp. That's right. PrisecBootcamp.com. 3.5 day in-person event, September 12, 13, 14, and 15 is coming.
Louisville, Kentucky.
That's right.
You don't want to miss Bourbon and Breeches. It's
No.
I think it's the premier session.
You don't want to miss any of this. It's going to be
No.
a fantastic boot camp.
Yes.
So I'm excited for it. Super excited for it.
Yeah. I like trying new things, especially if it feels like it's going to go well.
Mm-hmm.
And at first, I wasn't so sure about this, but I'm starting to feel like I might be. That it is complicated to explain, just like anything else we do. But we're working on it.
That's right. That's
So
right.
the 3.5 days of intensive training. This is not a conference, but we're going to have it open to, I think we're going to try to cut it off at 75 total, but in person. And there's a lot of stuff, and we're probably going to just publish we're going to need to publish like a discussion of us talking about it somewhere. Yeah. So we can explain it, because once you explain it, people get real excited. But anyway, hoping the marketing people will come through for us.
Yeah. There you go.
Yeah. So check it out at PrisecBootcamp.com.
Yep. There will be something there, hopefully. It's on my list.
Yeah, you got time. You got a
Yep.
day or two.
Oh, okay. Is that it?
That's it.
Sweet. All right. So we do want to say thanks to our donors. We appreciate your support, and be sure to share this episode out this week. Now, let's dive into our HIPAA.
Say what?
That's right. So you found something to do with the FTC and their health breach notification rule.
Yeah, so this came out just last week. But there's always this discussion of who HIPAA covers. We trying to explain that when you're talking to somebody who's, well, my Fitbit and my Apple Health, and I have a personal health record chart, and none of those are covered. None of those are covered under HIPAA at all, because it only applies to a very narrow segment of healthcare providers. And then that segment is narrowed down even further. But this is, the FTC governs everybody else. And so they have basically created a rule that looks very similar to the HIPAA breach notification rule, very similar, that applies to anybody So it does not apply to HIPAA-covered entities or any other entity to the extent that it engages in activities as a business associate of a HIPAA-covered entity.
All
was
right.
very specific, but what it's saying is, no, it doesn't apply to HIPAA-covered entities, but if you're a business associate, you could be in a position where, depending on your client, the HIPAA applies for one client and this FTC rule applies for another client.
Mm.
So if you be a business associate, you need to pay attention because, oh, well, HIPAA doesn't apply to me here, but it does here. You may need to revisit all the it doesn't apply sections. If it remotely connects to anything to do with personal health records.
Okay.
So we're going to have the link to the rule so you can read the rule. And then they published a complying with FTC's health breach notification rule. And I recommend reading that.
Yeah.
So it's everybody outside of HIPAA, but they break it down and they say a vendor of personal health records. So if you create an app and you're managing personal health records, right? Then you are a vendor of personal health records. And they give that as it is the vendor if it offers or maintains a personal health record, which is defined as an electronic record of identifiable health information on an individual that can be drawn from multiple sources that is managed, shared, and controlled by or primarily for the individual. Basically, you need to make sure if you develop a health app that collects information from consumers and can sync with a consumer's fitness tracker, you're probably a vendor of personal health records, it says. But if you're covered by HIPAA, you're not a vendor.
This is one of the few times where being covered by HIPAA may help you.
Exactly. Yeah, and we can help you with HIPAA, but yeah. So the good news is that it's not something else for you to worry about if HIPAA applies, but if HIPAA doesn't apply, it's a new thing to worry about, and it has to do with, it's going to be one of those like that one. I felt like you're probably a vendor or personal, you might be a redneck, but there's going to be a series of decisions on where it applies. And so that's that. But then you get the PHR, personal health record related entity. We are related. If you interact with a vendor of personal health records, either by, and this I thought was important, offering products or services through the vendor's website, even if the site is covered by HIPAA. So if the site's covered by HIPAA, but this other thing over here is not, then that's where you fall under FTC. So you need to really pay attention because here it says, for example, a company that offers a fitness tracker is likely a PHR-related entity if it sends information to health apps, which are likely personal health records. Okay? So if you offer any kind of fitness tracker, whatever it is, if it sends information to a health record, if it's not contained, then, and most of them now, they just spew that stuff everywhere. So then that could be it. And then, of course, the third-party service provider offers services involving the use, maintenance, disclosure, or disposal of health information to vendors of personal health records or PHR related. So basically the last two we talked about.
Right.
So whatever you're doing, and use, maintain, disclose, or dispose. Create, receive, maintain, transmit. Just saying. So, and you need to get in there and understand what an unauthorized acquisition is. And there's terms that are very specific. And then one thing here makes you, aren't you glad you're covered by HIPAA? Because you got to notify the FTC in 10 business days.
Hmm.
There you go. And there's some other very specific stuff of you gather information in 30 days. It'll be unreasonable to wait until the 60th to notify people. I mean, there's some specific stuff in here, and it's very much like the HIPAA breach notification rule. And if you're a vendor, it could be you have to do both.
Wow.
Yeah.
So not that we haven't said this before, but we've said this before. Just because HIPAA doesn't touch you doesn't mean something else won't.
Yeah. So just know that if you have these kind of rules in place, then you're prepared. And by the way, all of the vendors who tell us when we're doing an assessment of them, we don't have to do the breach notification rule.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know what you signed in your BAA about providing everything you need to do the breach notification? Are you aware that the covered entities can tell you need to do the breach? They can assign it back to you. There is a lot you need to understand, so don't ignore it. And certainly don't ignore this new one. So there you go.
All righty. So that leads us to today's topic, which is something that we don't talk about much.
I know, something that we think about, but then again, realize we don't talk about it.
Yeah. So this is something that I see this a lot as being a complete open gaping wound, and that's website security. Now, I can't tell you how many times I've gone to a client or prospect's website, and we rarely manage the websites. Usually it's one of those things that they may bring in later on, but that's not our core focus. And so typically a client would have somebody else doing their website for a long time before we end up getting to that point of looking at it.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know that there's been more than a handful of times where there was security actually in place on the website. And usually the only time security is there is because somehow somebody hacked the site, defaced the site, got in and made changes to it. I've even seen websites where they've gone in and they change payment information so that as the site's collecting payments, no longer is it being dumped into the right account. It's going to somebody else's account. And all that gets overlooked. So website security is a huge thing that is a big problem in small business.
Yeah, I think a lot of people, you know how we always talk about people kind of have this opinion that, the internet is no different than having a storefront.
Mm-hmm.
That if I'm on the internet, it's the same as me having an office where people come for appointments. It is not. It is not the same as having, you remember the old days, the Yellow Pages ads?
Yeah.
That was cutting edge stuff, man. Yellow Pages. Every business had, that's where you look things up. You need to find somebody, you went to the Yellow Pages. Now, if you have Yellow Pages, everybody's like, what are you talking about? But it's almost like they see the website as they slapped a billboard out somewhere, and now they don't have to worry about it. That'll give people my phone number, and that's all it's going to do. If it's on the web, it's never truly static.
No. Well, people can not only deface your site, which, that happens quite frequently. I've seen small businesses where they come to us and they're like, my site is redirecting to porn.
Yeah.
And I'm like, wow, that can't be good for business.
Yeah, it's porn. Male enhancement medications is a frequent way that it gets redirected. But most people, it just never occurs to them. And often, the so-and-so does our website. Okay, web designers are not security people.
Mm-mm.
They'll look at you like, well, that's the host. And the host is like, we give you the stuff.
Yeah, there's a big gap there.
That's that
it's
gaping wound you're talking about.
Yeah. We've got a couple of local web designers that actually they go through us for the hosting and the security and all that, because they understand that there's a difference between what they are doing and what we're doing.
Yeah, there's a difference between web designers and security, just like there's a difference between IT and cybersecurity. Same thing. It's like, oh, you're good with computers, so you know how to do everything. No. You know, you're way better at the hardware and how things connect and all of those kind of things under the technology realm. And I'm on the side of a developer, and I look at it from, how the software works, where you tend to look at it more from how the hardware works first and then the software. And I look at it the exact opposite. And that's a very crazy thing for people to think they're all the same. It never is. Never. So the good news is that you can manage it within reason, and it doesn't take like a ton of effort. Would you say? There's some good plugins and stuff that work.
Yeah, it's now, of course, you have to look at, okay, what platform is your website built on?
Right.
Most people don't even know that.
Exactly.
But you really need to know that.
Yeah.
Because that's kind of where you want to start. I would say it's a safe bet in most cases to look at probably WordPress as being what most people are using. But I know there are the free ones out there. I still see people that are in business that are jumping onto Wix and Squarespace, and kind of drives me crazy, really.
Then you'll have the web developer telling you need to do it in Drupal, and you've got to do it this way or that way, and that's horrible. It's the same as anything else. Everybody's got an opinion, and we know what that means.
Yeah, no matter what you go with, Drupal, WordPress, there's other ones out there. They all have vulnerabilities. It's a matter of making sure that you have something in place to make sure that you can monitor and manage those vulnerabilities. And like everything else, if you just throw a website out there and you're not paying attention to it, then things can go badly.
Yeah. Just slapping it out there and moving on. I've seen it go so badly for so many people. So often, it's just, we just did the episode on social media and the importance of making sure that social media was secure. But the website thing there were too many things that popped in the realm where, when we hear it, we think website, and other people hear it and they're like, wah, 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 wah. So a big example of that is the Log4j vulnerabilities, and HHS and 405D team that does the SBARs, which I couldn't remember. I just knew it began with situation and ended with recommendation. I couldn't remember when I was being interviewed on Jen Stone's Security Metrics podcast to talk about 405D, and I couldn't remember the middle.
You were just singing Rock the S-Bar?
Yeah. Should have done that. The situation background assessment recommendation. So the idea is that the 405D task group grabs a hold of a topic that is a big topic that matters to healthcare, but it's also technical. And they evaluate it and define the situation, give you a little background, assess what it means in healthcare, and give you recommendations. So I'm giving you the link to the SBAR. You can also get it at the 405d.hhs.gov website under resources. But there's also HHS put out Log4j vulnerabilities and the health sector a briefing as well. Now, the reason I bring this up is you hear Log4j, boop, blah, 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 blah. And you hear, oh, Apache. Blah, 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 blah.
It sounds like the teacher on Charlie Brown.
Exactly.
Wah, 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 wah.
So it's the same thing that people are hearing. And here's the important thing you need to know is a big, there's a lot of stuff that this is involved in. Don't get me wrong. It's not just this, But the most important thing is there are a bunch. I almost used other words. There's a bunch of websites that run on Apache, and Apache server is one of the big areas where the Log4j thing sits.
Mm-hmm.
Is that a fair statement?
That is a fair statement.
So you want to check out the impacts, or make sure your technical people do, even if you don't. You get that S bar and say, I want to document that we understand this, meaning we as in you understand this, and that we're covered. And you also need to check with, because a lot of people will have these 405D servers, 405D. A lot of people will have these servers.
I was like, I've never heard of a 405D server.
A lot of people have these Apache kind of servers. They'll have web servers internally, but they won't even know that they have those turned on.
Mm-hmm.
And those could be Apache. So there's a lot that you need to make sure is you don't realize you're serving a website when you're doing stuff, even internally sometimes, to work on local resources or to access some tool that's on your local server. You could be using a website that has this vulnerability. And we no longer do security assuming no one will get in. We've got our fortress built and everybody's safe inside. We cannot do that anymore.
Right.
Please tell people that, David.
I do it too much.
I know, right?
I think it scares most people when they run away.
I know. We're back at, we're just a little village with no castle walls built around us. That's how we have to function. We have to assume they'll get in. But the thing is that with these vulnerabilities, they can inject things and make those websites do things.
Mm-hmm.
Or give access to things. And do not ask your web developer if they're secured from Log4j, because they very likely may not know.
Yeah. And just understand too, there was a lot of talk a couple of years ago around securing websites and the HTTP versus HTTPS.
Yes.
And don't assume that just because you see HTTPS, you're like, oh, we're good.
Yeah.
We don't have to do
that doesn't
anything
matter.
else.
No,
Yeah.
that's not what
We're talking about
about.
talking about a completely different security thing here.
Yeah. The HTTPS means we're carrying on a conversation, and it's like we're using the two cans with the string.
Yeah. It's like your conversation is secure, but you have your front door standing open.
That's right.
So, you know.
Everybody's sitting on the porch listening.
Yeah.
Because it's what's happening on the backside once the information gets there is where this comes into play.
Yep.
So you want to make sure that somebody understands, and I can tell you there's a lot of hosting folks that use managed WordPress or something along those lines.
Mm-hmm.
And I can assure you, for example, and by the time you hear this, it may be different, but I can tell you, for example, PHP, which is a application that Apache actually runs. It's a long story, but PHP is another thing. We have layers now, and Apache runs on PHP, and there is out-of-date versions of PHP running websites everywhere. As of December 22nd, PHP version 7.3 is no longer supported. You have to be on 7.4. You don't have to be on 8, which is the most current, but you do need to be on 7.4 and looking at getting to 8.
Yeah. And just realize that upgrading to the newest version really is not painful at all, but
usually, unless your website's been developed in a very slapped together way.
Yeah. Well, the process to upgrade is easy. Now, whether or not everything that you have on your site is going to like that upgrade, that's a completely different ballgame.
Yeah, and a lot of times web developers have no clue. They just go, oh, it's because you upgraded. So we have to redo your whole site.
Or they'll do something where, we're going to create this thing, and it's not going to run on PHP 5 years from now, but you shouldn't have it running 5 years from now anyway. Is what they're thinking.
Yeah. That's their That's the big thought there, is that you should redo it and pay us to do that. Which is not to say that's wrong. I'm just saying they didn't secure it. And they're not worried about the security on it because it's old. So if you're running an older thing, you need to understand, you need to know there's constant updates to all of these things. And you have to make sure that the content management system is up to date, any of the software it uses, the server that it's using, the server that server's using. And to simply say we're using managed WordPress from GoDaddy is not enough. Because GoDaddy is the one that I see that is running, managed WordPress is running 7.3 right now. And
not to mention that GoDaddy seems to make the news every couple of years from major security incidents.
Yeah, they're making me that's a whole nother story. We won't go down my own personal issues with things, but there's this assumption that because I use a big name, I don't have to worry about it. It's not true. And that's web developers.
But Donna, all these other thousands of websites wouldn't be on there if it wasn't super secure.
I know, right?
Here we go with the fly trap analogy again.
Yeah, I love that. I'm still laughing about that one. Look at all those flies. That's got to be good stuff right there.
Yeah.
Yeah. But the thing that we bring this to all around to is don't make assumptions that your website is okay. Don't make assumptions that just because the web developer tells you it's okay. It's okay. You want to get a report showing that you are on the latest releases of things and that things are all up to date, that somebody's paying attention.
And you better back that thing up, girl.
That's right. You better know where it's backed up. Because
tell you what.
So here's a few examples of why we're saying that you need to know this. And there are layers and layers of complexity with this. I'm not telling people that they should go secure their website themselves unless you're trying to manage it yourself. And then you do you.
Yeah. Well, take it from somebody who spent about 2 hours this morning trying to track down something that was blocking the ability for something on my website to save.
Yeah.
It's not easy sometimes to track down which piece of overlapping security is causing you not to be able to click the save button and get things to save.
Yeah, and developers will say, well, the reason that won't work is because you got this turned on. So turn off the security.
Yeah, they will say that.
Yeah. No, we need to figure out a happy medium.
And
there's
whitelisting.
There's plenty of options. So, but here's some things that is why we want you to worry about the examples of why we want you to worry about security on your website. These are just a few examples, just scratching the surface. Which the first one is what actually brought me down the path. St. Lucie County, Florida. Drug screening lab provides notice of data security incident.
Ruh-roh.
Yeah, so, Florida, it's a long story, but there's a lot of stuff I do that pays attention to Florida. And here's the bottom line. They're having to do patient notification under the HIPAA breach notification rules because they had a web portal that had a configuration error. Let's just start with that. Web configuration error from June 2nd, 2017 until October 13th, 2021.
Jeez. 4.5 years?
Yes. No one was looking. Now,
wow.
I'm just guessing because in December, they finally figured it out. So I'm just guessing that when they figured it out, it was because they were finally making a change and somebody went, is this on purpose?
Yeah, you're probably right.
You know, so no one had been looking. No one
Yeah.
had been evaluating. No one had been documenting it. And this is a portal that they have access to. So just because you're, oh, well, we use such and such a portal. Guess what? Portals have options.
Yeah, this falls into the, well, it works fine. What's
Yeah.
the problem?
Yeah.
But yeah, security is not a set it and forget it thing.
No, there's changes. That, you know, it's a reason that when we do our assessments, we ask people, well, what do you have a recommended security list from your EHR provider or, you know, any of the others? Do you have their white paper on security? Do you have any of those things? Because we want to make sure you're doing those things. Well, guess what? If you haven't looked since it was set up, they do updates.
Yeah, and sometimes updates break stuff. Hello, Microsoft.
Or they add a feature
Yeah.
where the default is not what you want it to be, which
Mhm.
turns off things. That one happens a lot. So there's one example of the importance of worrying about the security. Now, this one, I don't know how to, you know, the cookie consent.
Yeah, cookies are, right now, there's a lot in the news about the cookie.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because Google's trying to kill it, trying to kill the cookie off.
But even though, you know, everybody gets those consent things for websites and they just blow right by them.
Yep.
And I know you're like me. I'm looking for where are my options so that I can set my consent the way I want it. Do not screw around with me. And I have to make sure I'm not falling for the quick and easy way that I can have the marketing cookies turned off. And I think they're turned off, but then I give up and let them turn them on. So every visit to a website now involves trying to figure out how to get to the settings and all of that.
Yeah, that might be ending this year, though.
Yeah. So Massachusetts General Brigham, it's the big conglomerate in Massachusetts of healthcare entities, and they've been on our show before. We've talked about them before due to other things. But they just settled a lawsuit for $18.4 million over an issue collecting cookies with information. It wasn't PHI, but it was from people who were coming to their website for healthcare purposes. It wasn't PHI. They were collecting cookies without consent and then selling it to third parties.
Ooh.
Now, of course, those that have been damaged may get up to $100 each out of that $18.4 million. So I'm not saying, I'm just saying. So
Don't quit your day job.
no, right? So to make the assumption that your web developer's doing the right thing when they say, all we have to do is this, first of all we have to do is never, ever. That's a joke in technical places. Like, that's the programmer's last words is what we used to call it. All you got to do is that, and we don't need no stinking backup. Those are the two to test. So there's a big one, is if you don't understand what those developers are doing with tracking things, then you're gathering information that you may not know about. You may not have no idea you're gathering this information and that it's being shared because they're connecting things and they're not paying attention. Can't tell you the number of times that we'll go to a website when we're assessing somebody and they'll have some sort of chat thing. Okay, well, how is that secured? Well, it's you know, we don't really do anything on it, but do you talk to patients on it? Well, yeah, if they ask a question. So you're talking to patients about their health care on this chat thing. Are you aware of what's happening with the chat thing? We should turn that off. Can somebody have that turned off till we figure it out? Yes. And so that brings us to the most recent one that I saw, which was hackers planted secret backdoor in dozens of WordPress plugins and themes. So you were explaining. how that works.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, I think in this particular case, there was like 40 different themes and 53 different plugins, but I think they all belong to Access Press.
Yeah.
So if that's something you recognize, of course, most people, if you're not doing your own WordPress development, you probably have no idea. So it's certainly one of those things where you definitely want to ask questions of whoever's handling your website. Do we have anything from Access Press on here? But most websites, WordPress websites, they're running off a theme. Sometimes it could be the default theme that is installed. Typically never, but it could be. So your developers put some type of theme on there. They use all these plugins to make this functionality happen. So all the cool things you see it do, it takes a lot of moving parts to make that happen. And sometimes these moving parts don't like each other, and other times they are used against you, as in this case.
Yeah. Because here's the quote from the story that I just picked one of the ones I was reading. Compromised WordPress websites belonging to legitimate businesses, that would be you, me, we have legit business websites, multiple ones, are being used as a hotbed for malware delivery. So imagine this. So this is just another example that your site's not secured properly. They don't deface it. They don't do anything other than start to use your site to host and deliver malware. You don't even know what's going on. There's no evidence of it except for the fact that those links in somebody's phishing email is pulling a file off of your web server. Easy peasy.
Yep.
So, it is important to be certain that whoever's doing your website, regardless of what's on it, because the last thing you want is for people to track back the fact that they visited your website so that they could come and be a patient, a client, whatever. And then when they get there, they end up being duped or downloading malware, or their data is being shared because they visited and somebody picked up cookies, or any number of things. So don't ignore your website.
And just know that according to some statistics, that from 2020 to 2021, the number of security flaws reported in WordPress plugins has went up 142%.
Bam.
So if you want to know where the next wave of attacks are coming, well, there you go. As if you didn't have enough to worry about.
Yeah. So there's something to be said for asking whoever is developing your... I see this as an opportunity for web developers to set themselves apart because they start to deal with security instead of not.
Yeah.
They start to, because I assume they are not from the beginning.
Yeah. Yeah. Most of them don't. Their whole thing is, we want to get this website up and running. Security is not something they care about.
Right. Security's not convenient.
And then the other thing too is it's like everything else in IT. It takes constant monitoring and management, and most people don't want to pay for it. They're like, wait a minute, I can pay $5.95 a month to have my site hosted. Why should I pay you $50 a month? It's like, well, there's a big difference between hosted and monitored, managed, secured, and backed up, and all the other things.
Yeah, it's the same as, I could buy this server and pop it in here and use it in my business and not pay anybody anything. Go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, do that. See how long your car runs without putting any money in it.
Same thing. All right then, brother.
All righty. That is our show for today, folks. Now we got you some stuff you can do over the weekend, because I know every one of you is looking forward to digging into your website security.
At least put it on the to-do list.
Yep. At least ask questions and find out what's going on.
Yeah.
But anyway, Remember to follow us and share us out on your favorite social media site and rate us on our podcasting app. And remember, for Donna and myself, that HIPAA is not about compliance. It's about patient care.
You've been listening to the Help Me with HIPAA podcast, hosted by Donna Grindle and David Sims. The show created to help you with HIPAA. For more information or to ask us a question, visit our website at helpmewithhipaa.com. Neither Donna Grindle or David Sims are attorneys, and they do not offer binding legal advice concerning regulatory compliance. The information in this podcast should not be relied upon or construed as legal advice in any way. Consult your attorney for legal advice concerning compliance with HIPAA regulations.